Welcome to the Future Take series, where we ask people how we might achieve a more reconciled island of Ireland in the years ahead. Today, I'm joined by poet, performer, writer, educator, spoken word artist, and that's only a few of her talents, Felicia Olasanya. That list of achievements and talents of yours only goes some way to explaining, what it is that you do in your life. Language is almost at the center of all of them. I know that your first language is English. I know that your first language is Yoruba. How can you have two first languages?
I think that's the beauty of being a Nigerian Irish person. But also like being from Nigeria, English and Yoruba are very like predominant languages. I had the joy and the excitement of being able to learn both at the same time. At some point, they melded into the same sentences very often, but I think I found a fascination for language really early. And even after learning Yoruba as a child, I think when I moved to Ireland, I kept learning Yoruba because I was just fascinated by like the otherness of language.
Let me go back to the 7 or 8 year old, 6, 7, 8 year old who came to Ireland and who went to Longford, in fact, was the town that you settled in. At what point did the Irish language, enter her world, and what effect did it have on her, the young you?
Mm. I think learning Irish was easy for me, I think. Learning Irish felt like, oh, every place you go to comes with a different language. And I was really open to that. And growing up in Longford Town, I remember the teachers put me in extra English class because they were like, obviously this kid needs extra English. And then they just realized, oh no, you can speak English, you just speak it weird. And I think Irish exposed me even more to that. Being able to like color like how I speak is really exciting. But yeah, going to a multilingual, a multicultural school, Irish was just another language, actually. There's so many people speaking so many different languages in my school that it was like, whoa, um, Irish is just like English or just like Polish or Czechoslovakian or or Ghanaian or Tweed. It was just like, oh, this is okay to do. And um, this is kind of like a mark for each personality. That's what language did for me.
Were there, specific political ideas, or was there a politics within your mind? I know you were a very young girl at the time, but as you grew and as you went through your teenage years, was there did each language have its own political connotations?
I think, yes, it did. I think I was able to notice differences, but also realize that they were distinct. And if they were distinct, they had their own language was attached to a culture, and the culture was attached to identity. And I think I was pretty clear that being a Yoruba English speaker was very different to being a Slovakian English speaker. I was well aware of the differences between all of us, but those differences didn't matter for a long time because there wasn't space for it to matter. It was just, you're different, but you coexist. And I think I didn't learn about tolerance. I learned about acceptance. I learned about comfort in the difference. And that was my childhood predominantly.
So that early start, Feli, sounds almost idyllic. It sounds, like there's a kind of pipe dream that all of these colors, all of these cultures could all coexist with no hierarchy within all of that. When and how did it change for you?
Oh, I think going to college did that. I think I got really into the politics of things really quickly without realizing that I was headed into politics. I think when you learn pretty late that identity is politic, you having strong feelings about advocacy gets you into those spaces without you realizing. I think it was a few years ago that or just after college that I had an interview and I said to someone, they were like, oh, you're this political person and your poetry is political. And I was like, I didn't realize that standing up for what was like right was political. I didn't realize that being in the skin and the identity that I'm layered in made my advocacy political.
Even on a personal level, what kind of experiences did you have on the street during not being, making any political statements? When you were just walking down the streets, did you have negative experiences there?
I would have people disrespect me for just existing. I would have drive-by racism. People would be driving by their car and just yell out the N-bomb. And I was just kind of like, I don't even have anywhere to express that anger. And I got it more often than I thought I would. It was quite surprising. I stayed after college. I became kind of a local. I had a dog, so I would walk my dog a lot and I would see people quite often. I didn't expect that being a staple in the community would still expose me to racism. That was surprising, but it didn't.
I'm wondering, as a young girl, I suppose it must have been in Longford that you started to get lessons in Irish history, Felicia. Were there any particular parts of Irish history or stories from Irish history that spoke to you directly or in a very particular way?
There were these trilogy of books by Maritza Conlon McKenna. Yes. And it starts with Under the Hawthorn Tree. But what was about it for me was that it was through the eyes of children, and being a child at the time and being a huge book lover, I still read a lot, having that experience of like understanding olden Irish experiences and through the eyes of a child was like marveling for me. And then watching them go through migration, watching them go through grief, watching them go through poverty was like, oh my God. And then in all those containers, them daring to dream was incredible to me. And I think that's something interesting about Irishness and Nigerianness, that there's so many crossovers in terms of identity. There's so many crossovers in terms of national experiences that it makes being Black Irish, how do I say, quite solidly unique for me. I think a lot of people that emigrate to a new country often don't have those layers of connection.
When you speak like that about the parallels between the Nigerian and Irish experience, it makes me wonder how much of a Nigerian poem is your work there and how much of an Irish poem is your work there. There really are big crossovers, aren't there?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Very much so. I think the exciting thing about work is that through different eyes, it can gain either the same meaning or different meanings. And like, my favorite thing about that poem is that when I wrote it, it resonated for multiple types of identities, and that surprised me. There's a refrain in there that says, "They tried to bury us, but they didn't know there were seeds." And that line was from a Greek philosopher, poet, and writer from the last century, and it's been used in so many different like revolutions, it's been used in so many different like advocacy groups because of its impact and because of how deep the sentence is.
In recent times, you have started to use the pronouns they and them. Were there particular reasons for that? Was it associated with gender? Was it associated with sexuality? Was it associated with something totally different?
For me, my pronouns have changed because of how large I've discovered my personhood to be. And it's connected with sexuality, it's connected to gender, but it's also really spiritual for me. It's the thing that contains all sides of who I am and all layers of who I am. And for me, it's less about like the binary and more about a multiplicity. So it's less about not being one or not being the other. It's more about being plentiful, actually. Because the thing is, I accept, in relation to gender, I accept my body as a woman. I accept the container that I've came in. But for me, she is fine and her is fine, but they feels better. And that's because of being a multiplicity and a multiple of a person. And I've just found that anytime I've researched or tried to find people that take on those pronouns in that way, I don't really see many examples of that, actually.
It's also interesting when we go back to that early experience in Longford and how there was a great vainness within the school that you went to, St. Joseph's National School. Is there a lesson? Is there something to be learned from that? How to embrace all of the aspects of our own community, the colours, the languages, the cultures?
Oh, how do I answer that? It's a large question. I think to think less about tolerance and more about expansion. I think the term tolerance is often, I think what it actually definitely means is I don't like this thing, but I will tolerate it. I will accommodate it even though it's not preferable. Whereas if we look at Irishness and all the colors coming in and all the cultures coming in as an expansion rather than a restriction, I think it would be easier to handle and it would be more exciting to handle. I just think Irishness is strong enough and has the capacity to expand rather than to view inclusion as tolerance.
So when you look back at the events of November 2023 on the streets of Dublin, those riots, the anti-immigrant sentiments expressed in Belfast and in other parts of the island, how did that make you feel?
Surprised in a different way, terrified, horrified. I think it was really scary. I've never been scared to live in Ireland. I've never been scared being in Ireland. I've had the most ridiculous and the dumbest things happen, or the most frustrating and annoying things happen, but I've never been scared. I've had my phone stolen on O'Connell Street by a bike rider, and I felt comfortable enough to chase this guy on a bicycle because give me back my phone or I'm telling on you. Like that's how safe I feel in Ireland. That's how safe I feel in Dublin. And then just suddenly go to the kind of Dublin or the kind of Ireland where I'm scared to walk down the street because actually now I don't know what could happen. And the difference between the horror of that night and the average Dublin night is the guy that stole my phone would steal Grania's phone too. Whereas what happened in November, that was specifically for Black and brown people or visibly migrant people. And that was scary.
There was a period, I guess, when you as a person of colour had to say, my community needs to be seen and my community needs to be heard here. And I guess artistic expression gave you the chance to do that. How important are the arts in that respect, to give everything, all points of view, visibility and audibility?
I think the interesting relationship for Ireland with art is that art has always saved this country. And that's such a probably radical statement, but music, art, dancing, poetry, literature, it has saved this country a thousand times over because it has given people's voice a platform, the average Joe's voice a platform, for you to feel emboldened to feel the feelings that you feel. But I think the only way we can move forward is if there's multiple voices being heard at the same time.
I come to the question that we've put to everybody in the Future Takes series, which is for a more reconciled Ireland, whatever that looks like, however it is constituted, what do we need to give and what can we gain to achieve that in the years ahead?
I think we need to give each other platforms for speech, right? And this is a weird thing, but I don't know if you watch those movies where something happens in a town and then there's a town hall meeting. I feel like each part of the country needs a town hall meeting. We all need to get in a room together, literally and figuratively have conversations. And it's not to explain our humanity, but it's to address the problems that led to the the disrespect of our humanity. And secondly, we all need a sense of safety. Everybody needs a sense of safety. We all need to feel like there's something for us to actually look forward to living in the Isle of Ireland. If we all don't feel the sense of safety, we won't heal and we won't move forward. And Irishness can't, as I talked about, expand. I think what is important is to view and to accept that these conversations are not easy and that they do not come with a sense of ease. And we shouldn't be lazy about the approach. So what that means is actively seeking out these communities and these identities and these layers that don't come as easily to us. And that means going above and beyond in the search for the people, in the tools for the conversation, but also just knowing that it's not going to come comfortably or easy. And that's part of why I advocate for the ideas of town hall meetings, because they're there for that type of idea is really uncomfortable, like opposing views, opposing ideas. If you come from a place of learning and you want to learn, those spaces can really be fruitful because everybody gets disturbed at some point. And that's also the layer that I use for my art. I read this quote somewhere that says, art comforts the disturbed and disturbs the comfortable. And that's what good art is. And I think that's also the art of conversation. If you're having a really good conversation, at some point, one of us that's usually really comfortable is disturbed, and one of us that's disturbed gets some comfort.
Thank you very much, Feli.